Samsaradava nalaliraloka Tranaya Karduna Guna Gunatvam Praptasya Kalyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinam Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhyan Manasorasena Romanchakampa Shutarangavajyo Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinam Shri Vigrahara Dhananityanana Shingarathan Mandiramarjanado Yuktasya bhaktam saniyunjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinam Chaturvida Shri Bhagavad Prasada Swadana Triptan Hari Bhaksha Sangram Kritraiva Triptim Bhajata Sadaiva Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinam Shri Radhika Madhava Yurapara Madhurya Leela Gunarupanam Nam Pratikshanasvadanalolupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinam Nikunjayo no rati keli sedhai Yayali bhiv yukti rapekshaniya Tatrati daksharati vallavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravinam साक्षादरित्वेन समस्तशास्त्रे उक्तस्तथा भाव्यतेव साध्वी किन्तु प्रभोर्य प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् यस्य प्रसादा भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादा न गति कुतोऽपि जयं स्तुवांस्तस्य यसा श्रीसद्यं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे Time to open the volume. Little more. जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद चैतन्य नित्यानंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Neelamadava Radhe Jai Jaya Radhe Radhe Jaya Shri Radhe Jai Radhe Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Jaya Sitaram Sitaram Jaya Lakshman Hanuman Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Gurudeva Jaya Gurudeva Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol
Vishnupada Brahmamsa Prajakachaya Ashtota Shatashi Shimati Divine Grace Aparchana Vrinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Bhaktivedanta Institute Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupada Brahmamsa Prajakachaya Ashtota Shatashi Shimati Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai. Nam Acharya Srila Haridasa Kur Ki Jai. Premise Koho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Brajabhumi Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Shri Ayodhya Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Shayana Ekadashi Ki Jai. Ekadashi Varta Ki Jai. Harinama Sankirtan Ki Jai. Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bol. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to assembled devotees. All glory to assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glory to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Prahlada Daine. Lada Daine. Hiranyakashi Purvakshaha. Hiranyakashi Purvakshaha. Shilatankana Kalaye. Shilatankana Kalaye. To Nasimha Parato Nasimha. To Nasimha Parato Nasimha. Yato yato yami tato Nasimha. Yato yami tato Nasimha. Mahe Nasimha Rudaye Nasimha. He Nasimha Rudaye Nasimha. Narasimha Madhim Sharanam Prapate. Simha Madhim Sharanam Prapate. Tava Kara Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Singha Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringa Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Vakara Kamalavare Nakam Adbhuta Singha Ita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringa Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare जय जगदीश हरे। जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव। जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज। जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद। जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव। लक्ष्मी नरसिंहदेव भगवान की, प्रहलाद महाराज की, जगत गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की।
Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Prayasi Namo Namaha Radha Krishna Seva Pabo Hey Abhilashi Radha Krishna Seva Pabo Hey Abhilashi Ye tomara sharan loy tada vancha purna hoy Kripa kori koro tare Vrindavan vasi Morai Abhilash सदा युगल रूप राशि हे निवेदन धर सकीरनुगत कर सेवा आदि कर दिए कर निज दासी दीन कृष्ण दासे कोई न मोरा होय श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदाय न बासी श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदाय न बासी यानि कानि च पापानि प्रमहत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ते प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ते प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Tulsi Maharani Jaya, Tulsi Maharani Jaya, Tulsi Maharani Jaya, Tulsi Maharani. Jaya Vinde Devi Jaya, Vinde Devi Jaya, Vinde Devi Jaya, Vinde Devi. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Tulsi Maharani ki.
Vrindaya Tulasi Devaya Priyaya Keshwascha Vishnu Bhakti Pade Devi Satyavataya Namo Namaha. Vrindaya Tulasi Devaya Priyaya Keshwascha Vishnu Bhakti Pade Devi Satyavataya Namo Namaha. Vrindaya Tulasi Devaya Priyaya Keshwascha Vishnu Bhakti Pade Devi Satyavataya Namo Namaha. Vrinda Devi Tulasi Maharani ki. Oh Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow down before you again and again. My desire is in the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. For every shelter you have his wishes fulfilled. Bestow mercy upon him and make him a resident of Vrindavana. My desire also grant me residence in the precious groves of Shri Vrindavana Dham. Thus within my vision I shall always behold the beautiful person Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me follow the cowherd dancer's virgin. Please give me the privileged devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant of Krishna prays. May I always swim in the love of Shri Radha and Govinda. Srimati Tulasi Maharani ki jai. There are 10 offenses in the matter of chanting holy names that should be avoided, and they are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotees who have dedicated their life for propagating holy name the Lord. 2. To consider the name the demigods like Lord Shiva or Brahma to be equal to an independent name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the order of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Veda literature or literature pursuing the Vedic version. 5. To consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation to the holy name the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activity in the strength of chanting holy name. 8. To consider chanting Hare Krishna one of the auspicious ritualistic activities, offering the Vedas as fruitive activities, karma, ganda. 9. To instruct a faithless person about the glory of the holy name. 10. To not complete faith in the chanting holy names, and to maintain material attachments in understanding so many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just as trees who can fulfill to everyone. They are full of compassion and fallen conditioned souls. Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam ki jai. Cheto Darpana Marjanam Pavamahadavakni Nirvapanam Shriya Gairava Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavatu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Purunarmita Sadanam Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Bahudani Ja Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pita Niyamita Smaranena Kalaha Etadeshi Tava Kripa Bhagavam Mamapi Durudevami Desham Yahajani Nanuragaha Trinatapi Sunichena Tarorapi Saishnuna Amanina Manatena Kirtaniya Sata Harihi Na Thanam Na Janam Na Sundarim Kavitam Vachagadishaka Maye Mama Jammani Jammanishvare Bhavata Bhaktir Haituki Toi Ayinanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitam Mam Vishame Pavam Buddha Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Sthita Duri Satesham Vichintaya Nayanam Galata Shrutarya Vadanam Kadgata Rudaya Gira Pulaka Nichitam Vapurkada Tava Nama Kahane Bhavishati Yuga Itam Nimishena Chakshusha Pravisha Itam Shunya Itam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahe Name Ashirishava Padaratam Pinnastumam Atarshanam Marmhatam Karotuva Yatha Tatha Vidathatu Lampato Mad Prana Natha Susa Eva Na Paraha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam ki
Glory
to Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes fire of conditional life or repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity in the large, because it spreads the rays and benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendent knowledge. It increases ocean transcendent bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which all is anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone grants all benediction human beings. Thus there are hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendent names are vested all your transcendental energies. They are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by holy names. But I am so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more taller than the tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to commit wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. O Samarjananda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow I fall into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me where the atoms in the lotus feet. O my Lord, while my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name. When will my voice choke up and when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling our separation and consider moment to be like a great millennium. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he shall remain so even handle me roughly by the embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam ki jai. Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshumritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Soyam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragnatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakham Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachadadesha Tarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Namini Shri Varshabhani Devi Daitaya Kripapdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayine Prabhavin Namaha Madhuryo Jala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktita Shri Gaura Karana Shakti Vigrahaya Namostate Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinadarine Rupanuga Viruta Pasithanta Dvanta Harine Namo Gaurakishoraya Sasha Vairagya Murtaye Vipalambara Sambodhe Padam Pujayate Namaha Namo Bhaktivinodaya Sachidananda Namine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gauravir Bhava Pumestvam Nirdishta Sajana Priyaha Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Shri Jaganathaya Te Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhishcha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishe Namaha Pancha Tattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinapanto Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Jaitam Surato Pangor Mamamanda Matergati Matsarvasva Padambo Radha Madana Mohano Divya Dvindaranya Kaupaju Madaha Shrimad Ranagara Singhasanasto Shrimad Radha Shira Govinda Devo Pristhari Sevimano Smarami Shriman Rasa Sarambi Vamsi Vata Tatasita Karsham Vinu Sunego Pir Gopinatha Shri Yestunaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vishapanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Tata Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai. Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai.
Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadirade Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Chintamani Prakarasat Masukapaviksha Lakshariteshu Surabhi Rapipalayantam Lakshmi Sahasra Shatasam Brahmasevyamanam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Venum Kvanantam Aravinda Dalayatasham Parharvatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandarpakoti Kamaniya Vishesha Shubham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chantakala Savanamale Vamsi Ranangadam Panayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Tipanga Lalitam Yata Prakasham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Anganyasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pashanti Panti Karayanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chimmaya Satujala Vigrahasya Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Advaitam Achotam Anadi Mananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vedeshu Durlapam Adurlapam Atma Bhakto Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastu Koti Shatavatsara Sampragamyo Vayurathapi Manaso Munipangavaanam Sopyasti Yaprapada Simya Vichinta Tattve Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopi Asora Chaitum Jagadanta Kotim Yachakti Rasti Jagadanta Chayaya Danta Antantarastha Paramanu Chayantarastham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yadbhava Pavita Diyo Manujasateva Samprapya Rupa Mehimasana Yana Bhushaha Suktaryam Eva Nigama Patitai Suvanti Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chimmaya Rasa Patipavitapi Tabi Eva Nijarupataya Kalabihi Goloka Eva Nivasati Kilatma Bhutto Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churuta Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadeva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundam Achintya Guna Swarupam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murtishu Kalanya Mena Tishtan Nanavatarama Makaro Bhuvanishu Kintu Krishna Swayam Samapava Paramapumam Yo Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the supreme Godhead. He has an eternal blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, and he is the prime cause of all causes. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor who is tending the cows, yielding all desire in abodes built with spiritual gems surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or gopis. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock feather, with the figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers beautified with the moon locket, whose two hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Shamsundar is eternally manifest. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs, and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is inaccessible to the Vedas, but obtainable by pure, unalloyed devotion of the soul, who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, is without a beginning, whose form is endless, who is the beginning and the eternal Purusha, yet he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane extending over thousands of millions of years. He is an undifferentiated entity, as there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof. In his work of creation and millions of worlds, his potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and he is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe at one and the same time. Such is the primeval Lord, whom I adore. I adore the same Govinda, the primeval Lord, in whose praise men who are imbued with devotion sing the mantra suktas told by the Vedas by gaining their appropriate beauty, greatness, thrones, conveyances, and ornaments. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of the 64 artistic activities in the company of her confidants, Sakis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by his ever-blissful spiritual rasa. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shama Sundara, Krishna himself, with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna, and the different avatars in the world in the forms of Rama, Nrsimha, Vamana, etc., as his subjective portions. Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai, Gaura Premanandi, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Tinamani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gopani Pacharini Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Bhaskati Sacharini Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasti Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today we're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 12, Text number 1. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Glorification of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Janmadasya yata niviyad itaratas chartesu avigyaswarat tene brahma hidaya adhikavaye muyanti atsurayaha Tejo Varimadam Yata Vinimayo Yachati Sargo Misha Damna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dimahi. O my Lord Shri Krishna, Son of Vasudeva, all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen on fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of material nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.2. Dharma projita kaitravo cha paramo nirmatsaranam satam vedyam vastavamatra vastu sivadam tapotrayon mulam. Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni krite kim vapure ishvara sajurhide avurudyate cha kriti bihi sususabhistakshanat. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva, in its maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.3. Digama kapatarur galitam phalam sukhamukad amrita dravya samyutam pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam muhur aho raska bhuvibhavakaha. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami, therefore this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 12, text number 1. So let's see, we did have some homework for today. Did anybody do the homework? Yes? Okay. Let's go over the homework real quick, and we will continue. We'll start the 12th chapter.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Thank you, Prabhu. Go ahead.
The homework was to note down the important points in the last 6 to 7 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 11. I have started from Canto 3, Chapter 11, 34 text, where the reference was given to Bhagavad Gita 8.17. So in that, some of the facts, what I understood from Prabhupada, and which was very eye-opening, I would say, is one, by these calculations, the life of Brahma seems fantastic and interminable. But from the viewpoint of eternality, it is a brief of a lightning flash.
That's very, very significant and, let's say, shocking.
Exactly, yeah.
So that shows the relativity of time in the universe. And that time factor depends on whether we are attached to the body or not. When we're attached to the body, that time factor rules us. If we're not attached to the body, then we're not ruled by the time factor. So everything depends on what we're identifying with. If we identify with the body, we fall under the grip of the time factor, which is the impersonal representation of Krishna. And he controls everything through the time factor. Go ahead.
In the same text, in the material world, not even Brahma is free from the process of birth, old age, disease, and death. It's from the same Bhagavad Gita 8.17.
Yeah.
Almost the last paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Brahma and all the inhabitants of the Brahmaloka are subject to death according to the law of material nature.
Yes.
So generally, as growing up, hearing Brahma, Vishnu and Maheshwara, we never thought there is death for them. At least I didn't know that. So it was really eye-opening that even Brahma is a jiva and he has a death too.
That's why we have homework. So we can learn these things.
And then going to Srimad Bhagavatam 3.11.38, now he attempts to give some idea of the time of the unlimited personality of Godhead. This was being explained by Maitreya Muni to Vidura, where even the great personalities, I mean, the reason I wrote this is, even the great sages like Maitreya Muni, they also have just some idea about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So where Prabhupada mentioned that the entire duration of life of Brahma is calculated to be less than a second of Lord's time as per Brahma Samhita 5.48.
Again, absolutely shocking statement. Go ahead.
In the same text, Mayavadis calculate everything in terms of man's capacity.
That is, like I said yesterday, the Achilles heel of the Mayavadis. You want to defeat them. This is the point. They're calculating in terms of mankind, not in terms of the supreme absolute truth, transcendental truth, or Krishna. So therefore, they're going to get everything wrong. And there's explanations of that in this purport also. So it's not difficult to defeat the Mayavadis if you have learned these points that are being made in these last verses of the chapter 11, canto 3. Go ahead.
There is full continuation from there, Maharaj. They think that the existence of Supreme is just the opposite of active human existence. Because the human being has senses, the Supreme must be without sense perception. Because the human being has a form, the Supreme must be formless. And because the human being sleeps, the Supreme must not sleep.
These are all false logic. You can use logic, you can use reason, and end up with false conclusions. It's not that reason, logic, and science will give you the truth. And why would you end up with wrong conclusions? Well, this started a long time ago in ancient Greece, where it would says, basically Aristotle and a few other people before him started saying that man is the measure. In other words, Aristotle, he deviated from his guru, who was Socrates and Plato. He deviated from his gurus, who believed that there is a God although it's impersonal understanding of God, still they believed there's a God, and that God. But they had misconceptions about who God is, but at least they believed in God. Aristotle turns it upside down and says, no. Man is the measure of everything. So this becomes the Mayavad philosophy, that instead of trying to understand who Krishna is, they just try to understand the truth by analyzing human beings and human experience. So because of that, they make false assumptions because they cut off their relationship with transcendental reality of Krishna and the spiritual world. So, and we see this is all pervading. Like we've been studying definitions in the dictionaries, and we see that most of the definitions are incomplete or flat out misleading or false. So this is what people are learning. They want to learn what a word means. They look it up in a dictionary, but they only get a partial definition or a wrong definition. See? So this is the, as we said, the Achilles heel. You want to defeat Mayavad philosophy, you have to understand this one point, and then from that you can defeat them. That they are seeing everything in terms of man's capacity. Their idea is obtained by a poor fund of knowledge. They calculate everything in terms of man's capacity. They think that the existence of the Supreme is just the opposite of active human existence. Because the human being has senses, the Supreme must be without sense perception. Because the human being has a form, the Supreme must be formless. And because the human being sleeps, the Supreme must not sleep. Srimad Bhagavatam, however, does not agree with such impersonalists. It is clearly stated herein that the Supreme Lord rests in Yoga Nidra, as previously discussed. And because he sleeps, naturally he must breathe. And the Brahma Samhita confirms that within his breathing period, innumerable Brahmas take birth and die. This is amazing knowledge that Prabhupada is giving here. So these are the things that we have to learn. These are what we call fundamental concepts. Just like Prabhupada said, life comes from life. Okay, what are the scientists saying? They're saying life comes from matter, dead matter. You see, there's a huge difference. And because they only base things on the body and matter, but we base everything on Krishna, the Transcendental Supreme Personality of Godhead. So unless we understand these points, we can easily be duped or cheated or misled, especially by modern education, which completely rejects the existence of the spiritual world and Krishna and so forth. Okay, go ahead.
The last point I made was how Srila Prabhupada has completely agreed in agreement between Srimad Bhagavatam and the Brahma Samhita, how they both talk the same.
Yeah, there's no contradiction between the two. Yeah.
While doing the homework, Maharaj, I came up some questions.
Sure, I'm sure you must have come up with many questions.
The one question was, so after every yuga, is there a partial annihilation happening?
Okay, there are three major dissolutions, and there are a few other minor dissolutions of the universe. Okay, so there's, of course, the end of Brahma's life is complete dissolution. Right? Then, at the end of every Manu, and every Manu lives about 72 cycles of 4 ages, plus a few more, you would say, yugas. Okay, so therefore, that's a second type of let's say partial destruction of the universe. And also, so anyway, there's 3 major destructions, and then there's a few minor destructions in the universe. Okay, so and in any case, if you look at the body of people, well, the destruction is going to go on all the time, right? The body gets old and then it dies. But there are major destructions that take place. So when we study this subject, we see that everything is cyclic in the material world. Whether it's dissolutions, partial dissolutions, partial dissolutions, or complete dissolution, where it's the life of a human being. You're born, you grow, you stay, you give off byproducts, you begin to dwindle, and then you die. So there are all these cycles. There's the carbon cycle, there's the phosphorus cycle, there's the changing seasons. Everything is cyclic, and therefore everything on the macroscopic level and on the microscopic level are happening in a what you would call predictable way, right? So there's nothing new under the sun. Everything is being repeated over and over again. Okay. So now your question was, again?
Is there a partial annihilation after every yuga? Because after Kali Yuga, then we follow it by Satya Yuga.
Well, that's the cycle.
Right.
Okay? You have Satya Yuga and Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. And then it starts over again, Satya Yuga, etc. It's cyclic. And it happens 1,000 times in one kalpa, or one day of Brahma. And his night time is the same duration. And so everything is perfectly planned. That's why in the previous in this chapter 11, we're studying the calculation of time from the atom all the way to the life of Brahma, which is 311 trillion 40 billion years. So he goes from atomic time to the duration of time of Brahma, but Brahma's time is like 1 second, or one breathing inhalation or exhalation of Mahavishnu. So it's mind-boggling, right? 311 trillion years of existence of Brahma, but it looks like one breath of Mahavishnu. All this is doing what? It's expanding our time-space module. Every one of us lives in what's called a time-space module. Now, most of our time-space module is like a kitchen, a living room, a bedroom, a car. Sometimes we go to the beach, so it expands a lot more there, right? But most of the time, it's these small spaces. So that's what we're used to, that small space. And then the time, we live to be a maximum like 100 years old. Most people don't even reach that threshold. So most of the time we we're experiencing 1 hour, 10 minutes, 1 minute, right? So our time-space module is very, very limited. Now we read Srimad Bhagavatam, all of a sudden it explodes. We're hearing about the lifetime of Brahma, right? The secondary creator of the material world. He's not actually a creator, but he's expander of the original creation done by Krishna. So once we expand our time-space module, we're able to get free of misconceptions. We begin to see how this universe is functioning. This is what this is all about. It's how does the universe function, right? The scientists don't know. They know very little about how the universe is functioning. We find out that the diameter of the material universe is 4 billion miles. But then there are at least 5 coverings of the universe, and each one is 10 times bigger than the previous one. So all of a sudden, what seems to be already impossible to comprehend, 4 billion mile diameter, becomes even more complicated by understanding that there are at least 5 coverings of the material universe, each one 10 times bigger than the previous one. So we're running into billions and billions and trillions of miles, right? But we only live in like a Honda, right? So it's a very, very limited space, you see. And or we're in a kitchen cooking, or we're in the bathroom, or in a shower taking a shower. That's so to be able to fathom or to understand what's going on in the universe, it requires a tremendous expansion of our consciousness. But that's necessary if we want to understand who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that the same thing that we're discussing now is in the verses of the Brahma Samhita that we recite every morning. It's explaining the same thing in much more poetry, but still, it's to open up our mind to understanding what is our position. Our position is we are all completely dependent on Krishna. Everything depends on Krishna. Everything is coming from Krishna. Everything is maintained by Krishna. Everything is destroyed by Krishna. Everything is recreated by Krishna, you see. Now, you don't get that by reading definitions in the dictionary. They don't mention Krishna at all, or hardly at all. So that's why we have to read Srimad Bhagavatam and especially Bhagavad Gita if we want to understand how this universe is functioning. Okay, anything else?
In Bhagavad Gita 8.17, the last line, the Brahma and all the inhabitants of Brahmaloka are subject to death according to the law of material nature. So the question is, does law of material nature stop at Brahmaloka?
Law of material nature means dharma. What is governing all the functions in the material universe. These are laws of material nature. Now, I've explained this before. When you get an idiot like Elon Musk who says we're going to build communities on Mars because we won't be able to live on the Earth anymore. We've destroyed the ecology of the Earth. Blah blah blah. This is a nonsense statement, because he's claiming he's going to do something that is impossible to do. Why? Because the laws of material nature. You can't live with this body on Mars. It's the material, let's say, construction of Mars is different than the Earth. So what do people do, especially the scientists? They always come up with projects that are impossible to obtain or succeed, like going to the moon. We already proved they never went to the moon. Or like now we're going to go to Mars. Nobody's going to go to Mars, right? And then we're going to make death optional by 2050. No, death is not going to be optional by 2050. These are laws of material nature that cannot be circumvented. So unless we understand what the laws of material nature are, we will begin to believe these nonsense theories that are being thrown out by the scientists and these false promises that they're throwing out. And people become bewildered by them and actually believe that it's possible that, life will be, it'll be optional. If you want to die, you can die. If you don't want to die, we'll keep you alive by putting you in some kind of a nitrogen liquid before you die and preserve your body. And then later on, when we find out the solution to death will bring you back to life. It's all nonsense. None of it is true, you see. So this is what's going on today. And it's being taught, there's the Big Bang. There we come from monkeys. All these things are being taught as science. They're not. It's not science. It's all lies. It's all misconceptions. So unless we teach our kids this, they will go along with all these false theories, and then they'll be making mistakes throughout their life, right? And spending time trying to do research on projects that are impossible to obtain or impossible to finish. So learning what the laws of material nature are. The laws of material nature are synonymous with dharma, right? Dharma means what is your occupational duty. Your occupational duty is not to build a Starbucks on Mars. That's not our occupational duty. Our occupational duty is to go back to Godhead in this lifetime. So if we're going to become serious about spiritual life, we have to first of all understand what are lies, what are false concepts, what are violations of the laws of nature or dharma. Then we free ourselves of all these false concepts, and then we can understand who we actually are and how we can attain the perfection of human life. We can go back to Godhead in this lifetime. Okay, so that's very good. You have any more?
One last one, Maharaj.
Yes.
In Srimad Bhagavatam 3.11.38, in the last few lines, in the spiritual world there is undoubtedly time, but it has no control over activities. Time is unlimited, and the spiritual world is also unlimited, since everything there exists on the absolute plane.
Where would you read from? Which verse?
Srimad Bhagavatam 3.11.38.
Yeah. Okay. What was your question?
When Prabhupada says there is no control over activities, I wasn't like anything we do in spiritual world has no.
But it has no control over activities. Okay. Eternal time is never lost along with the life of Brahma. It continues, but it has no ability to control the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because the Lord is the controller of time. In the spiritual world, there's undoubtedly time, but it has no control over activities. You want to understand what that means? It has no control over it. Yeah. Okay. So, in the material world, we perceive time by its passage. And due to passage of time, things deteriorate, right? Let's say you have a brand new car. and you're driving down the road, and there's some ice, and you have an accident. Now your brand new car, which was perfect, right? Now it's got a big bump in it with scratches, right? So this is what happens in the material world. Everything is subject to decay, and everything's going to disappear, and everything's going to be destroyed, and everything's going to be created again, right? This doesn't happen in the spiritual world. Time does not have any destructive influence in the spiritual world. Time is supportive. So in the spiritual world, we perceive time by its non-passage, whereas in the material world, we perceive time by its passage and the fact that over time, things get destroyed and deteriorated. Right? So, like for example, when the gopis are dancing with Krishna in the Rasa Leela, right, it's going on for a huge amount of time. But for them, it goes by like this, right? So it's not controlling people's activities anymore in the spiritual world. It's supporting them. Whereas in the material world, it's destroying things over time. So now we're learning the difference between what time is in the spiritual world and what time is in the material world. There has to be major differences between the material world and the spiritual world. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any difference, right? So these are the things that we learn by reading Srimad Bhagavatam. We're not going to learn this anywhere else. No one else is going to explain this. The scientists don't even agree that there is a spiritual world. The Mayavadis don't believe that there is a spiritual world. They believe even this world is false, right? They don't even believe that jivas exist. They believe it's just an illusion. There's only one soul that's Brahman, right? So how can they teach anyone the truth? They're teaching all false things, whether it's the Mayavadis or the scientists, and people are going along with it out of ignorance, and because of that, they're not using the time that they have properly, and then they remain in the cycle of birth and death. This is all serious, very, very serious subject. And if we understand this, then we become actually happy and full of bliss, because we know, especially here it says, that in the spiritual world there is undoubtedly time, but it has no control over activities. Time is unlimited, and the spiritual world is also unlimited, since everything there exists on the absolute plane. This is what we actually want. This is what everybody actually wants. Why are they trying to find a way to make the body immortal? Well, because they don't want to die. They don't want to get old, right? But they're going about it completely wrong. This is the solution. Go back to Godhead. Then the time no longer has control over you. All your activities become immortal. Say, the one thing that they want, they're going after it in the completely wrong way. Whereas this is what they should study. This is what they should actually teach. You see, so if we don't teach this, we are violating our mandate as a devotee. Now, someone will say, well, what good is this? I can't make any money. I can't make $150,000 a year if I learn that time has no control over activities in the spiritual world. You see, those are like very, very, let's say, irresponsible statements. If we don't learn this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, our life is going to be a failure. We're going to stay in the cycle of birth and death. And you don't know, we don't really understand what that means. We could go back into the animal kingdom and take millions of years before we come back to the human form again. You see, that's why this subject is so important. Now, whether I'm going to make $150,000 a year because I'm an AI or IT person, that's not that important, right? Your parents and grandparents, like, let me ask a question, like, how much money did your grandparents make in their lifetime?
Quite some money.
Huh?
Quite good money, Maharaj.
A lot of money?
Not
No, very little, right?
Yeah.
Now, but they raised their kids, right?
Yeah.
The kids turned out to be good, right? And so you see, it doesn't matter whether you make 150,000 or 500,000 or $1 million a year. What matters is, are you going to try to go back to Godhead or not? That's what's important. So you can raise your kids most people in the United States, and this is something people don't understand. Most people in the United States, they hardly make more than $50,000 a year. And some much less than that. But still they live, right? Now, don't look at some Amish and places like this. People are making these astronomical sums and spending huge sums on buying houses and things like that. Most people in this country are not making more than $50,000 a year. It used to be even less than that, right? It's gone up a little bit, right? And then obviously you see the homeless people too. So let's not be fooled. Whether you make a lot of money or not is not really important. Whether you understand how to go back to Godhead, that's important. Because that means it's a solution to all the problems of life. Okay. And you have to learn these, what you would call transcendental concepts. Life comes from life. That's a transcendental concept, right? And what's being taught is the opposite. That life comes from matter, from dead matter. So these are the things that we have to overcome by reading Bhagavatam and believing it. Right? Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Any other questions? All right. So there was another question yesterday that was about. Let's see. Yes, verse number 40. The phenomenal material world is expanded to a diameter of 4 billion miles as a combination of 8 material elements transformed into 16 further categories within and without as follows. Right? Is that the one? Yeah. Okay. As explained before, the question was, it seems that the 8 material elements and the 16 further categories, the mind was referred to twice, right? So you're asking, why is it like that, or is it, it shouldn't be like that?
No, that means like mind is both a sense and an element. Is that what?
Okay. See, mind is a subtle element. So it can have different functions. It's not only one function. Like, like for example, if you say that eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, well, they all have one specific function, right? But when you talk about the mind, it can have multiple dimensions of functions. That's why it's mentioned twice as part of the 8 material elements as well as the 16 further categories, okay, within and without, as follows. So as explained before, the entire material world is a display of 16 diversities and 8 material elements. So, therefore, the mind can be a diversity as well as a material element at the same time, right? Because of its subtle nature. The analytical studies of the material world are the subject matter of Sankhya philosophy. What does Sankhya mean? Sankhya means you count things, you quantify things, right? There's so many material elements, just like this is quantifying. There are 16 diversities and 8 material elements. There's quantification, right? And the first 16 diversities are the 11 senses and 5 sense objects. So what are the 11 senses? So you have eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and then you have the 5 working senses, the voice, the legs, the hands, the anus, the genitals. So that's 10. And then on top of that, you have the mind, that's 11. And then the 5 sense objects, that is smell, taste, and touch, and sound, and okay, so anyway, that makes the 16 that we're talking about, right? And then the 5, and then the 8, earth, water, fire, air, sky, mind, intelligence, and false ego. So that's 16 and 8, where mind is mentioned twice, but mind can have multiple functions, whereas the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the skin have limited functions. Therefore, the mind can be in both categories. Okay? All right. So, we went over the homework for today. Right? This homework is very important because something could go in one ear and come out the other ear. And even though you heard it, it's not sure that you're going to remember it. But when you do the homework, at least you're going to learn something and keep it in your mind, and you have something to refer to because you have notes. And later on, you'll see when, let's say, 10 years from now, you read the notes that and things that you were learning here, and you'll say, wow, I learned all that stuff. That's amazing. You say, so you don't realize how important it is to do the homework. Homework means that you're actually thinking, not just, 45 minutes in the morning, but you're thinking about it throughout the day, and you have it written down somewhere, and you can look at it, and you can assimilate it, right? And what we want to assimilate is these, what you would call Mahavakyas, great statements like life comes from life. You see, that could solve, that can save your life if you understand that concept, life comes from life. See? And or that time has no control of the activities in the spiritual world. These are major statements. These are that can let's say, constitute your whole consciousness and put you on the fast track to go back to Godhead. That's why we have homework. That's why we're studying this. I mean, someone will say, look, this is a waste of time for me because I'm not going to make money learning, that the diameter of the universe is 4 billion miles. Yeah, okay, you might say that. But when you're approaching death, you'll say, why the heck didn't I learn these things that Hari Vilas was talking about? And Prabhupada took the time to write all these things down, staying up all night long, translating these books. Then you realize I should have paid attention to this because I'm going to die right now and I don't know what's going to happen to me. So, and then there's another major statement. Even Brahma is afraid of death, right? We read that also in these verses. Even Brahma is afraid, and he lives 311 trillion years, and he's afraid of death. Just imagine us. We hardly even live 60, 80 years. And imagine the fear and the consternation we're going to have when we're approaching death. So in order to keep the equilibrium of the mind and keep our mind focused on Krishna, we should learn all this information, especially these major statements. Life comes from life. Time has no control, activities in the spiritual world, etc. This is all very important information if you want to go back to Godhead. So I'll stop right there. Are there any questions? So then tomorrow's homework is, of course, you read the first verse of the 12th chapter, and you understand what are the first thing that Brahma created. Brahma first created the nescient engagements like self-deception, the sense of death, anger after frustration, the sense of false ownership, and the illusory bodily conception or forgetfulness of one's real identity. This is a huge statement. Now, Brahma is not the primary creator, right? Krishna is the primary creator of everything. Brahma he just gets the seeds of what Krishna has created, and then he disseminates them and oversees their fructification. And all those seeds turn into living entities, into all kinds of different things in the material world. Now the question is, why would the first thing he creates, or Brahma, let's say, brings into existence, engagements, nescient engagements? You have to think about this. Why would this be the first thing that he did? Even before being the Prajapati and giving life to all different species. So carefully read the purport and think about this, and try and understand why Brahma would have created these things first, because it looks like he's purposely putting people in a bad position right away, right from the beginning of life. But this is very important to understand. Okay? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna,
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
So, Maharaj, one quick.
Yes.
I know this is something that's covered in yesterday's class in 3:11:41.
Okay.
So this is somewhat hard to comprehend from our human senses, because each layer, the layers are elements covering the universes at each 10 times thicker than the one before.
Yes.
And in the purport, the first covering of the universe is Earth, and it is 10 times thicker than the universe itself.
Which is 4 billion miles in diameter.
Yeah. So there is.
What do you want to know about that?
So that means like this the universe itself is covered on top of.
Absolutely, yeah. It has these at least 5 coverings. Each one is 10 times more.
8 coverings.
All right. Well,
Because.
does it say 8?
this. Yeah, because all the 8 elements.
All the what?
8 elements. There are 8 elements. So it talks about first is earth, air, water. So the first is earth, then water, then the fire, then air, then ether, and then the mind, and so on. So
Okay, anyway, even the scientists have suspicion that there are coverings of the material world, but they have no knowledge what's going on, you see. You want to know what's going on, you have to read Srimad Bhagavatam. Of course, they won't read Srimad Bhagavatam, so therefore they'll never really figure out. I mean, it could take you hundreds and millions of years just to travel to the end of the material visible universe. And then beyond that, there's these other coverings that are even greater. So how would you ever become free of this? There's no way without the help of Krishna, you see. So why are we learning this? We're learning this because science, reason, logic, based on false premises such as there's only matter, there's no spirit, will never give you solutions to anything. It'll just keep every one of us in illusion and subject to these 5 types of ignorance that bind people to the cycle of birth and death. So we're learning by expansion of our consciousness what is possible, what is impossible. And there are laws of nature that cannot be defied. And once we learn what those laws of nature are, which is we're going to get to, we become sober. And then we don't have these false concepts anymore. Okay.
unimaginable.
Huh?
So it's hard to comprehend, but once we understand the gravity of the creation, or the enormity of the creation, the only simplest path is path of devotion.
Simplest path is sharanam.
Sharanam.
Surrender completely. Yeah. That doesn't mean you can't work. That doesn't mean you can't have a family. No, but you can do all these things in Krishna consciousness, rather than do all these things without Krishna consciousness, which is what's going on now. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. So is it right to say, Maharaj, that the time will not have a destroying effect on us, even on the earth, if we are engaged in a devotional services? I mean, is that the purpose that we should learn about the time? Is it right to say that?
No, what's right what's right to say is that by learning these things, we use time correctly. And not waste it, but use it by learning how to dovetail everything in Krishna consciousness. Just like one time, one pujari that's not here anymore, we gave him a car. So he had an accident with the car. He almost died. So I went to see him in the hospital. I said, Prabhu, what happened? He said, I had an accident, this thing, that thing. Then I said, well, where were you going with the car? He said, I had to go downtown Seattle. I said, okay. But what was the purpose? He said, I had to do something. I said, okay. What was that something that you had to do? He said, I don't really remember now. No, I said, you must know what it was. So one thing led to another. He was going to go see a movie. I said, that's why you had the accident. He said, what do you mean? I said, we gave you the car to use it in Krishna's service, and you were using it for nonsense. therefore you are not protected. If you're using it only in Krishna's service, you'd be protected by Krishna. So now, is this true? Well, yes, it is true. If you're always acting in Krishna consciousness, you'll be protected by the mercy of Krishna. And but in his case, he was blatantly going to do something that was not related to Krishna consciousness with the car that was given to him to be used only in the service of Krishna. You see. So what do we learn from all these things? We learn that we should dovetail all our activities in this world in Krishna consciousness. Then we have a chance to go back to Godhead. Okay?
In the homework, when you asked us to take notes, one point was that in Srimad Bhagavatam 3:11:39, Prabhupada writes that time can control only those who are body conscious.
There. See, that's a big statement right there.
Yeah.
Just like life comes from life, time can only control the activities.
Those who are with body consciousness.
If you're not body conscious, if you're using the body in Krishna's service, you will not be controlled by time and karma and so forth. All right, so we'll stop right there. Thank you very much. Okay, what is it? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
So, you should write these things down. Okay. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I have one question, and that question is, what was the first thing Krishna created in the material world?
Well, Krishna created everything in the material world. Right? So, you can start from well, that's what we're learning here, right? In the you have to understand that Krishna is the time factor. He's Kala. Right? So when you have the material world, you have to have time. Right? And time, it says, Mrityu Sarva Haras Chaham. Time I am, the destroyer of everything. So that's one of the first things he created. The Kala factor, or time, that is the Mrityu Sarva Haras Chaham, the destroyer of everything in the material world. So if you understand that, then now you have to become very careful what you do, so you don't fall into that category of being completely destroyed and staying, because you have an eternal soul, you could stay eternally in the material world as long as you're bodily conscious. So what does Prabhupada teach? He says, you are not the body. That's another major statement. So the first thing that Brahma does, he creates attachment to the body. And then people get misled and they fall into ignorance. So, but the first thing Krishna creates is time. Time that is the destroyer of things in the material world. Okay? Haribol. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So we have Aarti now. Sorry, we went a little late. So you count everything in terms of time, right? Now people have to go to work, so they have to rush out the door to be on time. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Please accept my humble obeisances. Jai. safe trip. Thank you very much. That's all right. It's getting better. Yeah. Thank you very much. I hope. No, it got delayed. Yeah, it got delayed, unfortunately. Hari Bol Prabhuji. Thank you. Hari Krishna.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma.
Bando mui savadana mate.
Bando mui savadana mate.
Bando mui savadana mate.
Bando mui savadana mate.
Jahara prasade bai e bhavatoriya jai.
Janara prasade bai e bhavatoriya jai.
Jahara prasade bai e bhavatoriya jai.
Janara prasade bai e bhavatoriya jai.
Krishna prapti hoy jaha hoy te.
Krishna prapti hoya hoite.
Guru mukha padma vakya chitite koriya kya.
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Akya.
Arna khori ho mane asha.
Arana Koriya Mane Asa.
Arna khori ho mane asha.
Arana Koriya Mane Asa.
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utama Gati.
Shri Guru Charane Rati Ese Utama Gati.
Je prasade pure sarva asha.
Ye prasade pure sarva asa.
Je prasade pure sarva asha.
Ye prasade pure sarva asa.
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से.
चक्षुदान दिला दे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से.
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशित
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशित
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशित
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशित
प्रेमा भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते
प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते
वेद गाय जहाँ रचरित
वेद गाय जन रचरित
वेद गाय जहाँ रचरित
वेद गाय जन रचरित
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनार बंधु
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदन जन बंधु
लोकेनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना
लोकेनाथ लोकेर जीवाना
लोकेनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना
लोकेनाथ लोकेर जीवाना
हा हा प्रभु करो दया देहो मोरे पद छाया
आहा प्रभु कोर दया देह मोरे पदचय
हा हा प्रभु करो दया देहो मोरे पद छाया
आहा प्रभु कोर दया देह मोरे पदचय
एबे जास गो शुक्ति भुवाना
बोलो ए भैयास सुखी भुवाना
श्रीला प्रभुपाद पतित पावना
शिला प्रभुपाद पतित पावना
जय प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद
जय प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद जय प्रभुपद
नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने
नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य
चैतन्य
प्रभु नित्यानंद
नित्यानंद
श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरा भक्त वृंद
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरा भक्त
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva, Jaya Guru Deva. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
His divine grace is Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Anantapati Vaishnava Namacharya Rasta Prem Sukhosh Chaitanya Prabhu Nishina Shivasi Gaurava Shri Radha Krishna Guru Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Madhuri Dham Ki Jai Shri Nath Dham Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Gangamaya Ki Jai Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Jai Gaura Prema all glories to Samaveda all glories to Samaveda all glories to Samaveda all glories to Shri Guru Shri Guru all glories to Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavani Ki Jai Ma Om Krishna Padaya Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru Nirvisesa Srinivas The lotus feet of our spiritual master, the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. I only wish to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic emanates. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, the Lord and master of mercy. O Master, be merciful to us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.